What is going on, everyone? Tim from Tierphone Orbital. So today's video is going to be a little bit unique in that I will be going over an install on a prototype hilt that will soon be a full-fledged run from Jawas Junkyard. This hilt is the hilt based off of Karre from Star Wars Visions. It is affectionately known as the shovel hilt. The shroud on this hilt, it looks like a shovel. I mean, let's be honest. But yeah, when I was approached by Leon from Jawas Junkyard to do the chassis for this run, I was very, very grateful to have the opportunity. So I wanted to make sure that we had a few things. There were a few caveats with this design, right? So with this particular hilt, in the show, the hilt itself telescopes, and there is also a flipping switch mechanism where you can view the crystal and all that. So the telescope action is not integrated into this particular hilt. However, there is a flippable switch or control box section. So I wanted to make sure that we had like a crystal chamber underneath that switch section. So I wanted to make sure that we had that integrated into the chassis itself. I had to keep a lot of things in mind when designing this chassis, right? So I'm fortunate when I do my own chassis, you know, for my commissions, I design my chassis the way that I want to, right? So like wire passages, I design them to my specs. I know exactly how to, you know, wire everything once it's printed. I wanted to make sure that I did a very install-friendly design for this chassis because it's going to be offered with the hilt. I wanted to make sure that, you know, this was an approachable install for anyone, right? So I made sure there was plenty of room for wire management. There's plenty of room to get your wires past that crystal chamber because, you know, designing a crystal chamber in a chassis is also a challenge, right? Because you don't have a lot of room to have your leads come up past that crystal chamber. So I wanted to make sure that this was as install friendly as possible. I also needed to make sure that it was producible, right? Like mass producible, probably going to be like what, 50 of them printed, but I wanted to make sure that it was not too greebly rich detail-wise because I knew this was going to be printed in an FDM material and not resin. So there were a few things that I had to change or switch up on my design process for this particular chassis, but I'm really, really happy with the result, okay? I want to come into Fusion and talk about the chassis because there are a few extra parts that will be part of this install should you choose to go forward and get this chassis with a hilt, right? So there are a few things to keep in mind. So without further ado, let's talk about the chassis first, come into Fusion. So there it is. All right, so right off the bat, you're going to notice that there are multiple parts to this hilt, or to this chassis rather. This is a long chassis. It's really, really, really long. So the first thing you will see, there is a spacer that sits in the pommel. It can be glued in the pommel, or you can just kind of slide it in there and it can be free floating. This helps to secure the chassis in place. This is an all-in-one chassis. So really all you're doing is making sure it's, you know, staying pressed up against the upper lip of the emitter in the hilt, right? So that lives in the pommel. Another thing that you will notice, this giant red piece is an extension for the actual switch mechanism. So because we have a red tactile button mounted to the surface of this chassis, the switch mechanism itself is not long enough to depress anything on the body of the chassis itself. You need to extend it a little bit. You'll get a better idea of that when we do an up close, but this will also be included in the hilt kit. It just needs to be glued with PC glue or however you'd like to the inside of the red switch, the red toggle switch. There is also a crystal that will come with this kit. I'm assuming it's going to be, you know, printed in some sort of clear polycarbonate material. I've seen some of the crystals that come with Leon's kit, and they are really, really nice, actually. They're very, very clear, a lot of clarity. They're not like too cloudy, so I'm sure that will come out just fine. I put a real quartz crystal in this particular install So you can choose to do either or, right? I mean, honestly, I just glued the crystal in the crystal chamber. So those are the extra parts. So let's talk about the rest of the chassis, right? So we've got a 28 millimeter speaker down here, plenty of room for a fully enclosed 28 millimeter speaker. There is a kill switch that will live in this channel here. And as you can see, I mean, there's plenty of room in this wire management hole, right? So there's plenty of room for your negative lead, for your 2 positives from your kill switch, and your 2 leads from your speaker. There's plenty of room. That wire channel goes all the way up to this internal cavity in here. When I wired this up, I just fished all of my wires through and they just kind of started poking through, and I grabbed them with a pair of tweezers. You might need to help get them out with a pair of tweezers in here, but this is where they will be. This is where they will come out, and you can make all your splices in this area underneath the board, okay? I also made sure there's room for 2 neopixels. So should you choose to do so, you can put a neopixel in the upper section and the lower section of that crystal chamber. Wiring up the positive battery terminal. I'm also going to link the battery terminals that I use, that I design around. I will link those in the video description. I don't know if they will be included with the kit or not, but you've got room to bring your positive battery lead through. Man, I'm so bad at not navigating in Fusion. You have plenty of room to bring that into this chamber, right? Then from here, to get your leads up to the emitter and your leads up to the switch, there are 2 channels, here and here. And they go up the back side of that crystal chamber. So essentially there's wire channels in here and in here. And they come all the way up to the inside of this section. So you can bring all of them up, wire up your PCB emitter, wire up your tactile switch, and be done with it, right? PCB emitter will just live in here. I've also got this particular chassis calls for a 3 millimeter neodymium magnet. So you're going to put a 3 millimeter magnet here. There's also a hole in that flipping control box mechanism for another 3 millimeter magnet. You can put that, you glue that in the control box side. We'll talk about that right now, actually. Let's come up top. Okay, so it's just, I know that was a lot to ingest. It's a lot easier if we just go over it visually, right? So this is the Karre hilt from Jawas Junkyard. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. This is based off of Karre's hilt from Star Wars Visions. The episode is called The Twins, affectionately known as the shovel hilt, right? So really interesting hilt. So I knew that I wanted to get a crystal chamber viewable in here, okay? So designing the chassis around that is the way that I approached this. I could have done it many ways, right? But again, I wanted to make sure this was as install friendly as possible. I mean, I could have probably mounted some sort of PCB in here, right? But then you'd have to like pop a hole to secure the PCB itself. So I wanted to make this as install friendly as possible. So I just did an all-in-one chassis for it, right? This is the switch section, the switch extension that I was talking about. You can kind of see it here. It's glued to that red toggle button, and that helps to push that red tactile button on the chassis itself. This switch is too shallow to hit anything on the inside of the hilt itself. There's just too much, the hinge point for it is too high, if that makes any sense. So you need to have some sort of extension to help it press that button on the chassis itself. Here is that neodymium magnet. You just mount that on the inside. So Leon has told me that the final version of this hilt will have a sturdier hinge mechanism. This does flop around a little bit, but Leon did tell me that they will be working on that to make that a little bit more robust, right? And that's it. Let's talk about the chassis. Here is the chassis. So I put a real quartz in here. There will likely be a like a resin or a polycarbonate crystal that will come with that kit. Okay, 28 millimeter speaker down here. Proffie board does sit in this tray. You can slide it up underneath that lip. Kill switch is here, and that's it. Just a very simple all-in-one chassis design. Very long. It's super long. So, like I mentioned, here is that there is also a spacer in the pommel, right? So that helps just to push that chassis in place and keep it from you know, moving down when you put your blade in. And that's it, right? So to use your chassis, to use your hilt, spring side is your negative. Rest that battery in that battery tray. Hit the kill switch.
What if I'm not strong enough to save her?
So
what do I do?
So I wired this up with 2 neopixels, top and bottom. They are independent of the blade, so in the config they are their own animation. Single button setup, obviously. So once you get your battery in the chassis, slide the chassis in so it's crystal up. Push it until it stops. Here is that pommel with the spacer in it. All you have to do is screw that pommel until it stops, and you're ready. So when you just got to keep in mind this, you know, this extension at the bottom of that switch. Make sure it's in the up position. Close it, and you're ready to go. Let's come down to the bottom. So we can open that control box and get a good view of that crystal. It's held in place with a strong magnet. Let's put a blade in it. Okay, so this is a 1-inch blade holder. There is a set screw right here underneath the shovel head section of the hilt. This is your blade retention screw. So just rest your blade on those PCB pins. Let me get my Allen key. Rest your blade on those PCB pins and then tighten that set screw. I'm just going to hand tighten it. And then you're ready to go. Let's see what else I put on here.
Ancient integration.
So this will be going back to Leon. I installed this for Leon. So Leon, I put a bunch of fonts on here. It's Proffie V3, so there's like 15 fonts on here, all with different blade styles.
Disgraceful.
Jedi じゃなくて残念だったな。
My name is Toby, and I'm a Jedi!
One more.
Kylo Ren.
Great hilt. Sounds really good. So it was an honor to be asked to do a chassis for a hilt run. This is my first time doing something like this, so it was a little nerve-wracking. I wanted to make sure that I designed a chassis that was very install-friendly for people, right? So yeah, I'm happy with the result. It's a very unique hilt to design a chassis around. So yeah, I had a lot of fun doing this one. So to Leon, thank you for choosing me to design the chassis for this run. To the viewers, everybody, thank you very much for watching. If anyone has any questions about this particular chassis or my design process, please do not be a stranger. And with that being said, may the shovel be with you always. Have a good one, everybody.